human beings were not made to be individuals. We were not made to be things that think, that logically define situations. Because if we were humans who just logically defined everything, we wouldn't act with other humans. We would simply stay in our rooms all day after they were built. We would simply sit there and read books and work on machines and build things to make the world a better place, because we would see that when we interact with other humans beyond work, we are wasting our time, because that's time that could be put towards making more efficient things for society, and thus by making more efficient things for society, society works better for us. All of the inventions, all of the things work together, even though it seems like these are individuals that are working on these things. It comes back because once an individual makes something, someone else can build off of that and use it to better society as a whole. And what's good for society is what's good for individuals. So under this mindset, so many people could simply just leave society. So many people could just not pay attention to what humans are doing and just go off on their own. But we don't. Why is that? Because humans were programmed to interact with other people for the sake of survival and propagation of the species. So the reason why you like walking outside, the reason why going outside actively makes you feel better and more healthy, is because humans had to adapt. We realized that the material conditions we're in are the sun, and the food that we get is in the ground and running around. So what do we do about that? We create tools to kill those things, and we create ways to get the food out of the ground. But in the process of doing that, you have to be out in the sun all day. When you have to be out in the sun all day, if you're not used to it, it's probably going to strain on you. So what does humanity do? We decide that from an evolutionary standpoint, we got to adapt to this environment, and now sun gives us vitamin D. We have an incentive to go out in the sun and not stay in our huts all day, because when we go out in the sun, we feel more happy. Hey, when you feel more happy when you go out in the sun, you're more likely to go out and get a wife. When you go out and get a wife, what do? You have children. The species stays around longer. When you go out in the sun to hunt, what do? You give food to your children, and they stay around longer to continue the cycle of the species. All of these things connect with one another. All of them have an effect on one another. And so when we see ourselves getting vitamin D and getting pleasure from talking to other individuals, the reason why we feel those things is because they are biologically programmed in us from day one. Human beings are social animals because through socializing, we continue being alive. So the thing that really came all of this to a head for me, the thing that made me completely realize the limits of humanity as reproduction and adaptation machines, was when I read a study that said homosexuals largely adopt children because they need the purpose of having a child. Think about that. Homosexuals, a human being who cannot reproduce with other people, can sit there and have a desire to have a child despite their inability to do so at all due to the limitations of their sexuality. When they see a woman, they do not get hard. They do not have the desire to stick their dick in it. So what do? They adopt. They adopt other children, and they get a sense of satisfaction from those children that are not biologically theirs. They get a sense of satisfaction from raising that child. Why? Because it's programmed in you from the beginning to do that. It is programmed in you from the beginning, even if your sexuality has a problem and doesn't quite fit within the confines of what humanity should do, you are still nonetheless attached to that basic programming of I need to protect child to propagate life that is instilled within all human beings, except probably psychopaths and all of them. But I mean, even then, the functions are still up there. They're just a little bit weird. And so that blew my mind when I saw that study that said homosexuals will just adopt kids because in the long run, it gives them that satisfaction. The people who decide morally that you shouldn't have children usually aren't very happy. The people who don't like children enough to not adopt are usually not very happy because they need that. They need that sense of satisfaction in their life. So many people say philosophically, I'm not going to have kids because philosophically, logically, it's right. Right. It's you don't have kids because you're bringing more pain into the world and you're introducing them to a life of suffering within a capitalist hellhole. And so you don't have kids because that's wrong. Morally, that's wrong. But we do it anyway because we're told biologically that we have to. You know, when the apes and the fucking what are they prehistoric humans, that when they came about, they weren't thinking about how we're going to have these large scale machines. They weren't thinking about how the world was going to be polluted and people are getting fucked out in wars. Human beings weren't designed to go on mass scale wars. We weren't designed to have millions of us slamming against each other. Sure, we were designed to be violent, but we weren't designed to be commanding naval ships. That is when the technology, the ingenuity of humans goes beyond what human nature actually is. And when we get to that point, we start deciding, well, logically, we shouldn't have kids because the world is fucked. We've made it fucked. But evolution couldn't have predicted that because evolution didn't know we were going to have such machines, and we haven't been around long enough to evolve with those machines. So what's happening? People have their old school desires to have a kid. They have their old school desires to take care of a child because that is programmed within their head from day one to continue propagating life and to continue going out for the hunt and bringing back food for the kids. And so that's what you want to do. You want to go out in the sun. You want to have kids. But you think about it logically, well, maybe I should just stay in my house all day and read fucking books about Epicurus, and then when I do that, I'm all good. But you can't. You can't, because that's not how humans work. Because on a base level, we are programmed to not work like that. And we haven't had enough time to evolve with the machines that we've built. We haven't had enough time to evolve with, you know, the structure of being on the computer all day in order to get our work done. Now, technology has kind of moved up to evolve with nature. Technology has created things like UV lights and vitamin D supplements, but even when you use those things, it only makes you marginally more happy. It doesn't work the same way as actually doing the thing because it's just a stimulated experience. Pornography, while it does help you with your stress levels, it does not substantiate or replace the actual act of having a child, because eventually you're going to feel the blunt of that. Eventually you are going to feel that you want a kid, that you want a real romantic partner. But at first, you know, porn works great. It helps get rid of those big desires that you have to go out and have a kid. Because you think about people my age, I'm like 16, you know, people my age, they're in prime having kid mode because back in the day you died when you were 30. So what happened? People worked around that. They evolved in order to think about, okay, I'm going to live this long. So if I'm going to live this long, I'm going to go have some fucking kids to keep the cycle going. But people don't live to 30 years anymore. They live to 80 to 90 in some cases. So what do we do about that? Well, when you're 16, you still want to have shitloads of fucking kids. Your hormones are still going. You got the testosterone going all over the place. Because back in the day, you got married at that age. Back in the day, you had to have a kid at 16 because you were going to die at 30, right? You were going to die from some sort of disease that we didn't know how to cure yet. And technology has found a way to make people live longer. But evolution didn't know that was going to happen. Evolution thought we were only going to live for 30 years. And so at 16, you are super fucking horny, ready to have kids with every single woman you see, because that's how you propagate life. But, you know, the remnants of these things are still here. Obviously evolution cannot just be gotten rid of so quickly, or else we wouldn't feel this way. When we go outside, we wouldn't need the sun. When we see a woman, we wouldn't immediately want to have kids with them because, you know, we've moved past that. But logic and human thoughts, human inventiveness cannot override nature. Nature is definite. Nature remains. We can only do so much to have self-control, But even when we control ourselves into the cave that we want to be in, even when we control ourselves into celibacy, we are still sad at the end of the day, because that sadness comes out of a lack of chemicals that are brought about by nature. The fucking serotonin and all that you get from going out in the sun, the vitamin D that you get from going out in the sun, there's a reason that's there. It's because of nature. And you can do everything you can to get that simulated and to get that unnaturally, but at the end of the day, it's never going to work quite the same. And you're going to feel like shit at the end of the day. Human beings need interaction. They need friendships. They need a group to survive in, because even though you can survive without a group these days, because human beings have become so distant from one another, we've learned ways to mail food to your house. Individuals worked on that, sure, but it's not the same as individuals working together to hunt in a pack. It's working the exact same way, but there's a little difference there. All individuals are working within a society, but they all feel disconnected from one another. No longer is society functioning for society as a whole in a connected sense. No, nowadays it's just individuals all disconnected from each other, going through the system of the internet and through, sending, food all the way from Quebec to Maine. Those people never met each other, and yet they're working for each other. Whereas in the old days, the way these systems would work was you would get in a group of 7 people and you would go out and hunt. And if someone tried to threaten your group, you would kill them. But it's not working like that anymore, because technology has progressed to a point where we can still work in groups, but we don't have to be beside those groups in the process of acquiescing food. And so we work differently now, but we don't, like, we still have that base desire to interact with people in our group, because that's how you survive. But the way that we interact with people is different, because it's all disconnected, it's all disassociated, it's all through the internet. And that makes people depressed. So how do we fix this? You go outside and you interact and you do everything you can to do the human stuff, to do the things that biology tells you to do. Because even if your mind is totally off the beaten path, if you're a gay person, you're still nonetheless coded by biology and coded by evolution. You still have that base desire to take care of a child, even when you can't have your own. It's still there. So that's something to think about, that no matter how far you go into your own system of logic, no matter how far you go into your own thoughts, you are still commanded by nature. You are still a machine built to reproduce and built to adapt to your environment to survive. You adapt to everything, because that is how you continue reproducing. Yeah, basically, all of you pseudo-intellectuals who think you can get away from nature, you're wrong. It can't be done. I was one of you. I used to be on that beaten path of going around and saying, I'm an individual, I can never go outside and all this other stuff. It's wrong. It's not how humans work. You can do everything you can to remain a sense of fulfillment in that time of isolation. And hey, sometimes that does work for a while, but after long enough, it ain't gonna work. Because you gotta have kids. That's what all human beings want. That's what all human beings were programmed to do. Even the gay ones were programmed to do that. So how are you, as a straight person, going to be any different? There's nothing.